The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the throne room, casting jewel-toned patterns across King Alaric's face. He sat rigid on his gilded throne, his crown heavy upon his thinning hair. 40 years of rule had etched deep lines around his eyes and mouth. The empire of Valoria stretched across 3 peninsulas and 2 mountain ranges, its coffers overflowing with gold and precious gems. Yet today, as on most days recently, the king felt hollow. "Your Majesty," a voice like soft velvet cut through his thoughts. "Your tea." Sebastian, the royal butler, approached with practiced grace. He carried a silver tray bearing a porcelain cup adorned with the royal crest, a lion surrounded by 7 stars. The steam rising from the cup carried the scent of jasmine and honey, the king's favorite. "Thank you, Sebastian." The king's voice was gruff, his mind elsewhere. Sebastian bowed deeply, his movements refined from decades of service. At 53, he was only 5 years younger than the king, but where Alaric had grown stout and weathered, Sebastian remained trim and poised, his silver-streaked black hair always perfectly combed. His dark eyes revealed nothing, as always. "Will there be anything else, Your Majesty?" Sebastian asked, his voice revealing nothing of his thoughts. The king waved a dismissive hand. "Number, leave me." As Sebastian retreated silently across the polished marble floor, King Alaric watched him. The butler had served in the palace for 30 years, beginning as a footman and rising steadily through the ranks. He knew every corridor, every secret passage, and quite possibly every secret the palace walls contained. What the king didn't know was that Sebastian knew far more than the location of hidden doors and forgotten treasures. He knew the empire itself, its strengths, its weaknesses, and most importantly, its growing discontent. Sebastian returned to the servants' quarters, nodding politely to the maids and footmen who scurried past. His private chamber was small but neat, with a narrow bed, a writing desk, and shelves lined with books. An unusual luxury for a servant, but one the king had permitted years ago after Sebastian had saved the young crown prince from drowning. Once inside, Sebastian locked his door and pulled a leather-bound journal from beneath a loose floorboard. Opening it to a fresh page, he wrote in a precise, elegant hand, "Day 10,957 of service." The king grows more distracted. The trade minister's report ignored again. The eastern provinces' delegates sent away without audience for the 3rd time this month. The crown prince continues his debauchery in the summer palace. The princess remains our best hope. He closed the journal, returned it to its hiding place, and checked his pocket watch. In 20 minutes, he would need to oversee the preparation of the king's lunch. In 2 hours, he had a meeting in the city with a merchant who would deliver more than just imported spices. Sebastian smoothed his already immaculate uniform and studied his reflection in a small mirror. His face revealed nothing of the calculated rebellion brewing behind his eyes. Princess Alara stared out the window of her chambers, watching the city of Valoria spread before her like a tapestry of stone and wood. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the distant harbor was dotted with ships bringing goods from across the known world. Her father's empire was magnificent, or so she had been taught. A gentle knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called, turning from the window. Sebastian stepped in, carrying not a tray but a folded piece of parchment. "Your Highness, a message from your tutor. He regrets that he cannot attend today's lesson due to illness." Ilara's brow furrowed. "That's the 3rd time this month. Is Master Thorn truly ill so often?" Sebastian's expression remained neutral. "Perhaps the pressures of his position affect his constitution, Your Highness." Something in his tone made Ilara study the butler more carefully. At 18, she was observant beyond her years, a quality her father had never noticed or valued in his daughter. "Is there something else, Sebastian?" The butler hesitated, a rare moment of imperfection in his usually flawless demeanor. "If I may speak freely, Your Highness." "Of course. In Master Thorn's absence, perhaps you would benefit from some alternative reading." From within his jacket, Sebastian produced a slim, unmarked volume. Historical perspectives often broaden one's understanding of the present. Elara accepted the book, curiosity piqued. "What is this?" "A history of the Valorian Empire not found in the Royal Library, Your Highness. It details the early years of your grandfather's reign and the methods by which our current borders were established." Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Sebastian had been bringing her alternative readings for nearly a year now, forbidden texts that told darker truths about her family's rule than the sanitized histories she'd been taught. "Thank you, Sebastian. I'll return it when I've finished." He bowed. "Take your time, Your Highness. Knowledge should never be rushed." After the butler departed, Elara locked her door and opened the book. Unlike the previous volumes Sebastian had smuggled to her, this one contained more than just historical accounts. Tucked between pages were letters, recent ones, from provincial governors, merchants, and common citizens, all expressing grievances that never reached the king's ears. The princess read long into the night, her worldview shifting with each page turned. 6 months passed. King Alaric's health began to decline, though royal physicians could find no specific cause. He tired easily, his mind wandered during council meetings, and his temper flared unpredictably. The crown prince, summoned back from the summer palace, showed little interest in state affairs, preferring the company of sycophants and courtesans. Sebastian moved through the palace like a shadow, serving the king with unwavering dedication, while a network of allies grew throughout the empire. Merchants who had been unjustly taxed, farmers whose lands had been seized for royal hunting grounds, scholars whose works had been banned, all found themselves linked in an invisible web with the royal butler at its center. In her chambers, Princess Elara had become a student of governance, economics, and strategy. Sebastian arranged for her to meet discreetly with scholars, merchants, and even representatives from neighboring kingdoms. Without her father's knowledge, she was gaining an education no royal tutor would ever provide. On a crisp autumn evening, as Sebastian served the king his evening wine, Alaric looked up from his papers with bloodshot eyes. "You've been with us a long time, haven't you, Sebastian?" "Yes, Your Majesty. 30 years next month." The king nodded slowly. "Loyal service, not like these ministers and counselors with their endless demands and complaints." He sipped his wine. "Sometimes I think you're the only one in this palace I can truly trust." Sebastian bowed. "You honor me, Your Majesty." "Tell me, Sebastian, what do you hear among the servants? What do they say about their king?" The butler paused, carefully considering his words. "The palace staff serve with pride, Your Majesty. They are grateful for the security your rule provides. And beyond these walls, in the city, I venture into the city only rarely, Your Majesty." The king waved his hand dismissively. "But servants talk. They hear things, know things, speak freely." Sebastian straightened his posture slightly. "If I may be so bold, Your Majesty, there are concerns. The new tariffs have made certain goods unaffordable for common folk. The expanded conscription has taken sons from farms that need workers." King Alaric's face darkened. "Sacrifices necessary for the Empire's glory. The people should understand this." "Indeed, Your Majesty. Perhaps if they were made to understand the purpose behind these hardships, their loyalty would be reinforced." "Purpose?" The king laughed bitterly. "The purpose is to maintain what my father and his father built, to keep the empire strong." "Of course, Your Majesty," Sebastian replied smoothly. "Strength is essential, as is the wisdom to know where true strength lies. The king studied his butler through narrowed eyes, but before he could respond, a coughing fit seized him. Sebastian was immediately at his side with a handkerchief. When the king recovered, he waved the butler away. "Leave me. I'm tired." Sebastian bowed and retreated, his face betraying nothing of his thoughts. Winter descended on the capital, and with it came rumors of unrest in the eastern provinces. Reports reached the palace of tax collectors being turned away from villages, of imperial soldiers finding their usual quarters closed to them. The king dispatched additional troops, but heavy snows in the mountain passes delayed their march. In the palace, a more subtle rebellion was unfolding. Sebastian had gradually replaced key positions with people loyal to his vision. The head cook, the master of stables, the keeper of the royal seal. Each played their part, gathering information, spreading carefully crafted messages, and preparing for what was to come. Princess Elara now held regular secret meetings with trusted advisors, scholars, merchants, and provincial representatives brought to her by Sebastian. They spoke of reforms, of a new governance structure that would distribute power more equitably across the empire. Elara absorbed everything, asking insightful questions that impressed even the most skeptical attendees. The crown prince, meanwhile, found his usual excesses increasingly difficult to maintain. His favorite companions were mysteriously called away to family emergencies or offered lucrative opportunities abroad. Wine that once flowed freely became scarce, with shipments regrettably delayed by winter weather. As midwinter approached, the king's health deteriorated further. Royal physicians whispered among themselves, baffled by symptoms they couldn't quite diagnose or treat. Sebastian personally prepared all of the king's meals and medicines, his concern for his monarch's well-being apparent to all who observed him. On the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, King Alaric summoned his council for an emergency session. Reports had reached him of coordinated uprisings in 3 provinces. Provincial governors had declared themselves autonomous, backed by local merchants and farmers who refused to send taxes or goods to the capital. "This is treason," the king roared, slamming his fist on the council table. "I want troops dispatched immediately. Every rebel leader is to be publicly executed." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Minister of Defense cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, our forces are spread thin. With the eastern garrisons snowbound and the southern troops dealing with coastal raiders, we cannot quickly respond to multiple inland uprisings. Then hire mercenaries. Empty the treasury if you must." The king's face was flushed with anger. "I will not allow my empire to crumble." From his position by the wall, Sebastian observed silently. Everything was proceeding according to design. The uprisings were indeed coordinated, but not by provincial governors acting alone. Each rebellion had been carefully cultivated through years of patient work, with Sebastian's network providing support, strategy, and precise timing. As the council meeting dissolved into arguments over military strategy and budget allocations, Sebastian slipped away. In his private chamber, he wrote a brief message, sealed it, and passed it to a waiting page boy, one of many throughout the palace, loyal to him rather than the crown. The message would reach Princess Elara within the hour, signaling that the time had come for her to play her part. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the capital, the king collapsed while addressing his assembled troops in the palace courtyard. He was carried to his chambers, where physicians huddled around his bed. Sebastian stood nearby, his face a mask of concern as he coordinated the comings and goings of healers, servants, and council members. By midday, word spread throughout the city that the king was gravely ill. The crown prince, who had been conspicuously absent from the morning's events, was found in his chambers, too intoxicated to comprehend the situation. As evening approached, Princess Elara appeared before the royal council, composed and commanding in a way that surprised those who had dismissed her as merely her father's obedient daughter. "My father's condition is stable but serious," she informed them. "Until he recovers, or until my brother is capable, I will act as regent, as is my right by royal law." The council members, faced with a crisis and no viable alternatives, reluctantly agreed. Within hours, Princess Elara issued her first proclamations, suspending the recent tax increases, halting military actions against the rebellious provinces, and calling for provincial representatives to come to the capital for negotiations. Sebastian moved through these events like a conductor guiding an orchestra, always present where needed, offering quiet advice to the princess while maintaining his role as the loyal royal butler, concerned only with the king's welfare. As winter gave way to spring, King Alaric remained bedridden, his mind increasingly clouded. The crown prince, faced with dwindling resources for his indulgences and the cold shoulder of the court, departed for a diplomatic mission to a distant allied kingdom, a mission arranged by Sebastian to remove him from the game board. In the throne room where she now held court, Princess Elara, soon to be Queen Elara, received delegations from across the empire. Reforms were discussed, compromises reached, and a new structure of governance began to take shape. Provincial councils would have representation in a grand imperial assembly. Taxes would be standardized and publicly accounted for. Military service would be voluntary and compensated. Behind it all stood Sebastian, still in his butler's uniform, still serving tea and overseeing palace affairs with impeccable attention to detail. But those who looked closely might notice how provincial governors sought his counsel in hushed conversations, how merchants nodded to him with respect, how even foreign ambassadors seemed to defer to his subtle signals. On the day of King Alaric's death, peaceful in his sleep with Sebastian at his bedside, the butler wrote his final entry in the journal he had kept for 30 years. Day 11,315 of service. The king is dead. The empire is transformed, not conquered by armies or stolen by treachery, but rebuilt through patience, knowledge, and understanding of human nature. A butler serves, after all. I have simply served something greater than one man. When Queen Elara was crowned the following month, she appointed a new royal steward, a position created specifically for Sebastian, acknowledging at last his true role in the governance of the realm. The royal butler, who had invisibly reshaped an empire, stepped into the light, his power finally made official, though he had wielded it from the shadows for years. Those who had once dismissed him as merely a servant learned too late that true power lies not in crowns or thrones, but in understanding the human heart and the strategic placement of loyal hands throughout a kingdom. Sebastian had never needed to raise a sword or voice to conquer an empire. He had simply needed patience, observation, and the wisdom to know that even the mightiest kings depend on those who pour their tea.